Hello, test, test. Hello, can you hear me? Welcome to, I guess, the first episode of Let's Build an Android Browser. I hope everyone has a coffee or water or whatever you like to drink. And then we are going to build an Android browser. If you know how many people are working on browsers nowadays, like at Mozilla on Firefox or at Google on Chrome, then you might think building an Android browser, casually building a browser, that is kind of crazy. And you're probably right. If you want to build a browser from scratch today, as one person or a small team even, you're never going to finish it in a way that you can use it to browse today's web. The web is too complex, the browser internals are too complex, there's a lot of things you need to do. And while you are working on your browser, the web is continuously improving as well, so you will never catch up. So if we want to build a browser, we need to be smarter than starting from scratch. So what are our options? We could, of course, fork an existing browser, say Firefox or Chrome, and then we modify it to whatever we actually want to build. But we run into a similar problem because we need to get all the patches from the upstream project into our project as well, because the browser can't stand still. We need security patches, we need new web features, and since we can't implement all of them ourselves, we need to get patches in from the upstream project, and they might collide with the things we are actually building ourselves, and then it becomes a mess and becomes a project in itself to keep the browser up to date. So that might not work for us either. So what we actually want is some pieces from browsers that we can put together to whatever we want to build, and then maybe remove some pieces and put in something else that satisfies our needs. I think Lego is an awesome example. If you buy a kit from Lego for building a car, for example, you can assemble the car, and then you have a car as Lego thought a car should be. And then you can remove parts of it, put in your own pieces, and then you make it your own car. And that's exactly what we want to do. And on Android, I guess the first thing that comes to mind when you want to build something like a browser is maybe Webview. Webview comes with every Android browser. You can use it to display web content inside your app. That kind of can work. We did this as well at Mozilla, where we built Firefox Focus. It's a privacy browser. I can also show it here. That the first version of Focus was based on Webview, and it's called Firefox Client Germany. That's why it's not Focus here on my screen. And Webview has a bunch of problems if you want to build a browser. Webview is great for maybe showing web content in your app, but it's not enough to display the whole of the web itself. Biggest issue, I guess, if you start using Webview is that it's a view. So you always need to put it somewhere, and it needs a context, and you might be able to use it with an application context. It's possible, but you break a bunch of things. So that is not nice. If you build a browser with and you have 20 tabs, you don't want to have 20 web views around. That's not going to work well. And the API of Webview is quite limited if you want to build everything that a modern browser needs to support. So there are other options. The one we are going to look at is Gecko View. It's from Mozilla. It is wrapping the Gecko engine, that's the browser engine from Mozilla, into an Android library. And It's named Gecko View, like a web view, but it's not only a view. There's a runtime that you can interact with without using any of the views. You can load things in the background, and only if you need to, you can decide, okay, I want to render this thing on a view now because the user wants to look at this tab in a browser, for example. So I think a little bit over 2 years ago, Mozilla started heavily investing into Gecko View and building it as a foundation to build browsers or apps that need browser-like features. So Gecko View has a much nicer API if you want to build browsers or more powerful apps that do more interesting things with web content. I gave you one example. It is independent from the view. That's super nice. If you, let's say in a browser, open a tab in the background, you don't display this tab, but you still want to load it and render it. So the next time you switches to it, it's just display the thing. And it's not you create a view and now you load a page, how it's usually with Webview. Another great feature I think about Gecko View is it has web extension support. Web extensions, or add-ons often called, are things that can enhance your browser. Ad blocking is, I guess, a very popular example where you install an ad blocker add-on into your browser and then it blocks ads on pages. You can do the same with Gecko View. Web extensions is a standard that is used in multiple browsers like Firefox, Chrome. And if you, for example, are a user of uBlock, you can use uBlock in Gecko View and you have ad blocking. Awesome. So you can make use of the add-on ecosystem. And in addition to that, you can also use add-ons to enhance things that the Gecko View API might not give you. An example is, let's say you want to grab all the pictures on a website and do something fancy with them. Gecko View does not have an API, get all images on the current page. But you can load a web extension into Gecko View that can interact with the content, grab all the pictures. And then there's a mechanism how you can communicate between the extension and your Kotlin app code. And then you can do whatever you want. So that's a very powerful, great feature in Gecko. But again, this only gives you the browser engine. And a browser does a lot of more things. It looks simple, right? You have only this toolbar at the top. And type into, and then there's a big rectangle that renders the web. But there's a lot of things happening in a browser, and a lot of features that need to interact with the user out of the context of the web content itself. So usually browsers have also bigger front-end teams that, for example, build this UI. And you need things to store bookmarks. You want to save history. You want to have UI for displaying history. If you start typing into the URL bar, you want to get things from your favorite search engine. There's a lot of more things happening. And also roughly 2 years ago, Mozilla started to split all the things in Firefox for Android into standalone components. That's in this Android components repository. And here's a long list of things. And what's pretty interesting about those components is that, as said previously in this Lego example, you can pick what you need, put them together, and if there are pieces that you don't like, you can remove them and put your own thing in. So that's super powerful if you want to build a browser, for example. And that's the thing I want to use in those episodes. So that means we will build a basic browser throw in some components. For every component, we in return will get a new feature in the browser. And step by step, we'll have a almost full-featured browser. And then we can take pieces and replace them with custom code, customize the browser, make something interesting. And I'm actually not sure what it's going to be, and I hope that you help me figure out what we want to do. I'm open to trying a bunch of things. But first we need a starting point, right? And for the stream, I want to start from scratch. So in a minute, we are going to launch Android Studio, create an empty project, and start hacking. We will probably not get far today. I just want to have the basic project in place, create a GitHub repository so that you can look at it and so on. And by the next episode, I guarantee you that we will already have something and browse the web with it. And we'll not have all the features yet, but we will add them step by step. If you want to skip ahead and you are curious, how does this look like if it's done? There are two other repositories that I want to show you. One is Phoenix. That's the new Firefox for Android. If you want to try it, on Google Play, it's Firefox for Android Beta and Firefox Nightly. This is a new browser, and it's built in this repository, project name Phoenix. And it was built from the ground up with those components. So that is an example of a browser that you can build with those components. Now, Phoenix has a lot of custom code in the repository. So it's more than just putting the components together. There's a back and forth about what lives here and what lives as a component. And if you want to see more like a bare bones browser that you can build with Android components, we have this other repository called Reference Browser. It's a very basic browser that is only composed of the components, and there's almost no code in this repository except some glue code that puts some things together, maybe a little bit of UI here and there. So our first version will probably look a little bit like this, but built from scratch and maybe take different paths along the way. Let me know if you are interested in trying specific things. Once we have opened the repository, feel free to file issues and we will see where things go. And with that, I think it's time to launch Android Studio. By the way, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer your questions at any time. And while you might ask a question, I will already start a project. And see, do we want to start with an empty activity? Yeah, maybe. Do we want to put things into an activity? Let's start without an activity. Let's create a real empty project. So I've actually no clue how we should name this thing. Anyone in the chat has an opinion on how to name this browser? I'm open to suggestions. Otherwise, I will just pick a temporary name, I guess. I think I like the idea. Like Firefox is this mix of an elemental and an element, whatever the correct English word is, and an animal. Could pick a different element and a different animal if there's no other idea here. I think there are a bunch of Firefox folks actually that do something with ice in the name. I think there was Ice Cat, maybe? Ice Weasel? Ice Ant. like the idea of an ant. It's a small animal, mobile, small devices. But I'm open to changing it. Otherwise, I will just pick this as the first name of the thing. Minimum SDK. So our Android components have a minimum SDK version of 21, which is Android 5. So you build something with the components as is, then you need to have a minimum SDK version of 5 as well. What's interesting to know maybe is that Gecko View actually has a lower one. Let's see if this is documented somewhere. I think it's API 17. No, I can't find it right now. But I think it's 17. But if you want to use like a bare bones Gecko View, I'm pretty sure you will figure it out. Okay, no name suggestions in the chat. I will use the name Ice Ant, and I'm happy to switch to anything else later on. I guess we will just open an issue in the repository and then maybe find a better name. Right? Let's create an empty project. Okay, so Gradle is doing a thing. So while Gradle is doing the initial build and indexing and so on, I can talk a little bit more about the components. So I mentioned that you can stack them together and build something nice and then remove pieces. But how does this actually work? We did this by having different layers of components. And one important piece are those concept components. We take an example, concept toolbar. The toolbar component itself, or the concept toolbar component in this case, is not an actual toolbar. The concept component only contains some interfaces that define how a toolbar can be used, and other components depend only on those interfaces. So if you want to have a toolbar in your application that needs to interact with other components, you have two options. Either you implement those interfaces yourself because you want to build a very specific toolbar and that's the thing that you're interested in, or you pick an implementation like browser toolbar, which is a component that we provide. That's the component you can see, Firefox Nightly, for example. And that way, you can mix and match as you like, basically. On top of that, there's one higher level of components that we call feature components. A toolbar is a simple thing. You have toolbar here and an engine here. And for some features, you need glue code that glues multiple things together. If we take the example of a toolbar, you have the toolbar at the top, the web content below. And whenever you type into the toolbar, you need to load something in, I say, Webview now. Or if you click on a link in Webview and load a new page, it needs to tell the toolbar to update. And those things be wrapped as feature components. So you can also pick those feature components, and then they will glue together components for you and provide features with them. The example I just gave you with the toolbar is like feature toolbar. This thing knows how all the things related to a toolbar need to talk to each other. And there are other things. See, downloads, feature downloads. Click on something in the engine that downloads a file. You might need to show a dialog to the user while the download is running. You show a progress notification. Once it's done, you show something in the app. It's, hey, this download is done. And there might be a storage layer so that you can build UI that shows all your downloads. And that is usually wrapped in such a feature component. You can pick this and, wow, throw this in, connect a couple of pieces together, and you have downloads. Pretty nice. And also decide to not use this and write code that hooks into those APIs and does something different with downloads. Also, some of the components like downloads allow you to just customize individual pieces. Like, yeah, I want to have all the download feature stuff, but the dialog that is shown, I want to have something very different. So that's also like an in-component way of customizing things. All right, I guess Android Studio is done. So let's launch an emulator, I guess. I like that the default runner is not working. That is perfect. That's how a demo should be. Things do not work. So that's not our browser, that's still a Firefox running. Let's move this down here so that see the emulator. Does this work? I think that looks good. Okay. So, those streams, by the way, I will provide a recording somewhere. Because I also want to make them short, half an hour, not longer than an hour. But that's also not great if you want to see it live, so I will also have a way for watching it after the fact. So, thinking about the runner, I assume, yeah, we decided to not create an activity, so Android Studio is fine. Android Studio can't actually run anything. So, we want an activity. And probably for the first time ever, I will not launch the app and be confused why it's not working. This time I will remember to do the manifest. Unbelievable how often I've run apps without doing the manifest entry. I think there's even a lint warning nowadays, so harder to make the mistake. Okay, default activity not found. Might need to help Studio here. Yeah, of course. I added the activity entry, but I didn't make it complete. Well, maybe next time. What is the name? Oh wow. Need to I might already fail doing the manifest entry because I can't remember doing this from hand ever. So I need to peek. There's this entry called main something. Yeah, action main. Okay. All right. Already failing at the basic Android stuff. Let's launch this and then see. So, for everyone who has joined later, I'm happy to answer your questions and divert into doing things that you're interested in. Because now we need a basic project first so that we can start. All right. Let's add something to the activity and render some web content. That's probably the first step. And if we go back to the components, I mentioned we have those concept components that contain the interfaces and so on. There's one very important one, and this is the concept engine component. As I mentioned, concept components only contain interfaces that describe how such a component should work or what its public API is. And so the concept engine component is an abstraction that defines how a browser engine should be used. And what's pretty nice is that if we use this concept, then we can use whatever browser engine implements this concept. And we have multiple implementations that we can look at later. The powerful thing to remember here is there are multiple choices, and we can have an app that even builds against different engines. And we do not need to commit on a specific engine right now. So that's super nice. So we definitely need to include this concept component, and in all our code we will only use those interfaces. Now we need an implementation, of course, as well, at least at runtime. There's the engine Gecko component that uses Gecko View that I described earlier, and Gecko View is also released in multiple channels. There's a beta channel and there's a nightly channel. It's built every night, so really bleeding edge. And there's also a engine system component that uses the web view of the Android system you're running on. So you can actually switch between Gecko and WebView if this is something you do. Of course, as I mentioned before, the WebView APIs are limited compared to Gecko View. So not all of the features will work with WebView. That's something you probably need to know. So we are, for reasons, picking a Gecko version. We want all the features. And as I mentioned before, Gecko View is like a really good choice if you want to build a browser. You want all those fancy things. And I think we are actually going to use the nightly version. Leading edge is great. You might be afraid of, oh, breaking API, my app will be broken tomorrow if I switch to the next nightly. No, you don't need to care that much about this, because that's what the Android Components project will do for you, because there's a concept component. The implementation behind the interfaces, that's up to the Android Components team to make sure for every new nightly it still works. You only use this public API that can change too, of course, but not as often as maybe underlying things in the browser engine. So I talked a lot. Let's actually do this. We need to include the repository here. maven.mozilla.org. That's where we publish all the components. So let's add this here. Sync. And then let's go to, I'm actually one of those people that use the Android view. On Twitter, it seems like everyone hates the Android view. I am the user of the Android view. I like the Android view. Hey, Android Studio tried to be helpful and added a bunch of stuff here. Let's keep this for now and add some more. We need a concept engine component. Org Mozilla components concept engine. And I think the latest version is 49. Right? Yeah, 49. And then we need an actual implementation. You can already see that if you have multiple build flavors in Android, you can build them against different engine versions or release channels, and that's quite powerful. And if you go to the Phoenix repository that I showed earlier, which is like the new Firefox, it has different build variants building against different channels. And you can build against different channels from the same code base, which is quite interesting. Anyhow, browser engine Gecko nightly. All right, let's see if that worked. Super silent chat today. I said before, like, if you have any questions, if there's anything you want to know, let me know. Okay, browser engine Gecko nightly 49. I made a typo. Components. The typo was a test. Okay, it's downloading the AAR. This will take a while. We'll see the AAR is quite big. The reason for that is there are multiple processor architectures that Gecko View supports. I think 4 ARM and x86, and then a 32-bit and a 64-bit version of it. And they are all in the AAR. One processor architecture is at between 40 and 50 megabytes, I think. And 4 of them together, it's like 200. You can use the APK splitting feature of Gradle to create separate APKs for the separate processor architectures, and then of course you don't need to have a gigantic APK, you have multiple APK. You can, in theory, also build an AAB. We haven't done this yet. Reference browser that I showed before actually can build AABs, but we have not published them yet. So if you try this, you're a little bit on your own for now. But yeah, of course, eventually we want to ship A, B, C. And then, yeah, Google will figure out, or Google Play, what the right size is for your device. So, looks like the import worked this time. Let's create a view and render something. Today we will just add a view to the activity, throw stuff into it. That will be enough. Of course, over multiple streams, we hopefully turn this into something that is more appropriate. But for today, let's start simple and just I want to show you how easy it is to get something started. Did I just wanted to create a source? Layout and for now let's call it activity browser, I guess. And I think that can be just a frame layout. So we need a view where we render things, and the concept component gives us something called engine view. Not this one. Let's see, Mozilla components concept engine view. And then we make this use all the size it's available, give it an ID, for now just engine view. So there's a problem. When we run this now, this is going to blow up. The reason for that is that I go back to the repository. Engine view is in interface and the concept, because depending on which engine you choose, this needs a different implementation. So there's only an interface, and you can't put an interface into the layout. So we need to help Android figuring out what to actually do, and there is this method I think we can override, inflate or something with view and create view. That's the one. So to create a view, we need an engine first, so that we can say we want a view for this engine. An engine is kind of a global thing, at least in a browser. You need it always. It needs to always be a browser engine around. In Android, this usually means it's kind of a singleton, and so it doesn't make sense to do what I am writing right now to attach it to an activity. So that's just for the simple version that we are writing today. Later on, we need to turn this into a singleton. There are multiple ways to do this. This is the part where we can start a discussion about, do we need a dependency injection, which framework? And there's a lot of things to talk about, I guess. For now, we just ignore this. We create an engine here in the activity, and this will be fine for this run, but we don't want to have multiple engines when we have multiple activities. But for now, we will just ignore this. We will figure out how we want to do this later on. Maybe I actually create an issue on a repository, and then you can tell me, should we use Dagger? Should we use Coin? Should we not use dependency injection at all? If you look at reference browser, of course, since reference browser is like an example, only built from the components, we didn't want to throw in 20 Android frameworks that are hip right now. So we didn't use any of that. What we instead did is have this components object that provides components lazily. It's not super awesome, but it works quite well if you attach this to the application object. And then we have helper methods, for example, on fragment, that give you the components object. And then you can, from the components object, get the things you want. For those singletons that we have in our app, this works quite well in the example. Anyhow, I'm interested in trying something else here. So if you have an opinion, definitely let me know. Yeah, but today we are going to just put the engine here. So the app obviously did not crash because we never actually assigned the view. So we are going to fix this before it is going. So on create view in the activity is called for every view that Android will see in your XML. So we can take a look here and see the thing you want to create. Is this an engine view? And if it is, we use our engine and call create view, pass in the things we got, and then this should work, but it's red. Let's see. Oh yeah, it returns an engine view. We have the same problem again, which is an interface. But Android wants a view here. View, unfortunately, is an object and not an interface itself. That would be pretty nice here, because then every engine view could implement the view interface. Android doesn't give us this. We have a little helper here that you can just call as view. It's under the hood is just doing a cast here, because the thing that implements this interface is always a view. So we can just hard cast it here, and so that you don't have this ugly hard cast in your code, we added this little helper as well. So in theory, I can deploy this now, and you probably are going to see the same white screen, because yeah, nothing is actually happening yet. We just added this view into the layout, and it looks like it crashed. That's not what I was expecting, but I'm open to finding out what's happening. And I'm already starting to type things I'm used to type. This is now ice ant. Let's see what happened here. Null pointer exception. Attempt to invoke virtual method get application context on a null object. Oh, yeah. The problem here is we are creating the Gecko engine as a property inside activity. The Gecko engine needs a context at the time where this property is getting created. There's no context attached to this activity yet. like a lazy workaround is to use lazy so that the Gecko engine will get created here. And at this point, the activity already has a context. Everything is good. So this is a little bit clunky, right? You need to tell Android how to turn this into the view you want, this interface. But what you can do instead is, if you're not interested in this abstraction layer, you can use Gecko Engine View directly here. The implementation of Engine View. And then the class loader will do the right thing automatically, and you do not need to do this thing here where you look for the view that's getting created and return the right thing. But we want to have the flexibility for now to use other engine implementations. Let's see. Looks like it crashed again. Class cast exception interface cannot be cast to view. Okay, this looks like we are not actually going into this method. If I remember correctly, it might be possible that there's a new version on create view, and it's probably not the first time I made this mistake. I guess we would need to check if Android calls different versions in different API versions, but I'm pretty sure in our other browsers we also only have one implementation. Yeah, it is. Okay, Node Studio. Redeploy. And another crash. We will get there, I guess. Did it crash with exactly the same stack? Yeah, I will take a look here. I again overwrite the wrong one. So that's the one we use in the reference browser. Parent view, name, context, attribute sets, and then return a view. That looks good to me. And we look for the engine view, simple name. Oh, only name. With the wrong string comparison. Oh yeah, thank you for mentioning in the chat. Yeah, that should be lazy or late in it. You're absolutely right. And that's, yeah. We want it to be, make it easy and create the engine in the activity for now. Don't care. And of course, this caused more issues. That's what you get if you want to do it quick. So it's not crashing. Those debug statements look a little bit worrisome, but it's still here. Let's open, I think the layout inspector. Oops. Layout inspector. Let's get rid of this, and then we download a bunch of stuff, apparently. Finish. So here's our view, our content frame layout inside another frame layout. Not super nice. But here's our Gecko engine view, which, yeah, has some internals and ignore. Awesome, that works. Let's load the web. And for now, we will just hack this into this little piece of code here. And we will do something immediately here. So whenever you interact with an engine, you have a bunch of engine sessions. You can think of them as a tab in a browser. You load a page in this session, you can navigate forward, backward, load new things. One tab is one session. So here we go to our engine and say, let's create a session. And there are some parameters we can provide, like, is this a private session? Think about private browsing in your browser. If you use the private mode, it will not save anything to disk. So that's awesome if you build something like Focus, a privacy browser, or if your browser has a private mode. And it's a nice feature of Gecko View to do this automatically for you. Webview used to have a private mode. It does not have it anymore in new versions of Android. I think you can still see the API somewhere, but if you ever set private to true in Webview, it's going to explode. So we ignore this here. We do not need private mode right now. Context ID. Maybe needs more time to explain, but I can show you in Firefox, I guess. Not even sure if I can show this in the release version of Firefox. Very brief description. Containers. Firefox supports containers that isolate your cookies and so on from each other. So you can have tabs in different containers. And if you log into, let's say, Facebook in one container, and then you're not logged into Facebook in the other container. Internally, those containers are contexts. They have an ID. And if you provide different IDs here, then you isolate your sessions from each other. We don't need this. We only create a session here. And on a session, we can do things like loading a URL. So what you're seeing right now is the very bare bones API of the engine components or an engine component. Later on, you actually won't use this bare bones API, since there are other components that do a lot of things for you and they will call into the right things. For now, we use this bare bones API, but later on it will be less interesting to look at this API. Anyhow, let's load a page. Mozilla.org. Now the session will load this page. The view does not care about it. We need to tell the view, this is the session we want to render. Please render this session. And we can do this here by calling engine view. Oh, we already cast it to a view here. That's something we should do at the end. You can call render this engine session. And you can already imagine, if you now build a browser on top of only this bare bones API, you could have code that has a list of sessions, and whenever you switch tabs, you assign a different session to the view, and so you can do tab switching. Everything is nice. But it's a lot of things you need to write. And that's what we are going to do with components later. But for now, let's see if we can render the page. And I'm very happy to see it worked. You can scroll the page and click on links. We'll load pages. Awesome. And that's basically the code we wrote. Creating a session, render this on a view. The session we instructed to load something. And in our layout, we just dropped this view. Now, in the next episodes, we are going to drop in our toolbar component. This will allow us to navigate. We drop in the component that connects all the things. And then we do more things. And I'm open to hear what you would like to see. Otherwise, we just go through the list of components and see downloads or find a page, like I want to search in this page. There are a bunch of those things. And then we are trying to do something nice and replace functionality. Maybe build a really fancy tapestry, or we replace the toolbar with something that makes more sense, or yeah. I need your help to figure out what's interesting. So I think that's already enough code for today. Let's quickly create a repository, and then we push all the code. You can look at it and file issues about things that interest you. Then I'm happy to do more in the next episodes. Let's see, shouldn't be a wiki for engines components like sessions. I always found it confusing what session is. This is the first time to understand session and context. I'm at least happy that this helped you to understand. I'm not sure what you mean with your wiki. Is this maybe you can rephrase the question. I will try to answer it. I can understand that sessions are definitely not obvious at first. In some of our newer code, we try to get a little bit away from the word session, or using only the word session. In some of the components that care about the state of things, we started to use the name tab session state, which at least tells you that is a tab session. A tab is maybe something you have a better idea from using a browser what it is. And yeah, only session can be confusing. I'm biased. I'm already so used to this word. Don't see this anymore. Okay, let's go to the repository. So I mentioned before, IceAnt is a random thing. Maybe someone has a nice idea how we should name this browser, and then we pick this name. So should be public. We can add a README at a later time, I guess. Hit ignore. License. I haven't thought too much about licensing, but I feel quite comfortable to use the MPL here. I'm not a lawyer. My understanding of the MPL is you can use this in open source and closed source apps. If you modify any of the MPL code, you need to make it public. The modified code, at least. That's my understanding. If you are actually using this, make sure you really understand license. All right. Let's commit. Net. Let's see. ignore. Let's modify this quickly. I don't like to commit the idea folder at all. I'm going to ignore this completely. Everything else I think looks fine. I guess we can remove those example tests. We are going to add tests, but not the samples and not today. The launcher, oh yeah, we need, if anyone likes to do a launcher icon, I'm definitely not skilled enough to make icons. Okay, yeah, everything else looks good. Let's see. We started to use the name main for our main branch, so we are going to do this here too. And we call it initial commit. Yes. Oh yeah, we need to add the remote repository first before we can push to it. And let's see. To change the default branch to, oh my god, it's the documentation page. Okay, we haven't pushed the branch yet, so we can't make it. Main branch, let's go back. I need git push origin. Awesome. So the code is that's my account, pocmo iceant on GitHub. That's where you can get the code. And next time we are adding at least a toolbar, and I'm open to do more. It's your last chance to ask some questions, and I filed some issues that you can comment on. So first, how should we name this thing? Feel free to leave a comment here. iceant was only my first idea for a project name. It's not the most interesting one, I guess. And how should we manage our singletons? If you have an opinion, please leave it in this issue. And I guess I will going to add a description later to add more context here. All right. Thank you very much for watching. I want to stream again tomorrow, so hopefully see you tomorrow. And tomorrow we are going to browse, actually typing into a toolbar. All right, see you tomorrow. Bye bye.